The Great Hall of the Galaxy Council was the largest room ever built by any species. It floated in space aboard the station called Nexus Prime, and inside it, representatives from 47 different alien races gathered to decide the fate of trillions of lives. The ceilings stretched so high that clouds formed near the top. The walls were made of living crystal that changed color with the mood of the room. Today, the crystals glowed a soft purple. The council was amused. Ambassador Yuna stood alone at the center of the speaking floor. She was a small woman, with black hair pulled back tight against her head. Her diplomatic robes were simple compared to the bright colors and flowing fabrics worn by the alien delegates around her. She had stood in this same spot 11 times before. Each time, she had asked for the same thing. Each time she had been refused. "The Council recognizes the representative from Earth," said High Arbiter Velos. He was a tall creature with gray skin and 4 arms. His voice echoed through the hall like thunder. "You may speak your piece, though I suspect we already know what you will say." Laughter rippled through the chamber. The crystals flickered with hints of yellow. Yuna did not react. She had learned long ago that showing emotion in this room was a mistake. These beings did not respect passion. They saw it as weakness. "High Arbiter," she began, "in the past 6 months, raiders have attacked 12 human colony worlds. Over 40,000 of our people have died. Our defense forces are spread too thin. We are requesting military assistance from the Council, as is our right under the Compact of Species." Elegant Mora of the Alari Confederation leaned forward in her seat. She was covered in blue scales, and her eyes were solid black. "You're right," she said. "You speak of rights. Humanity controls 40 star systems. The Alari control 2,000. Perhaps you should learn to protect your own territory before asking others to do it for you." More laughter. The crystals turned a deeper shade of yellow. Yuna kept her voice steady. "The Compact states that any member species facing external threats may request aid. We are simply asking the Council to honor its own laws." High Arbiter Velos waved one of his 4 hands in dismissal. "The Council has reviewed your request. We find that these raider attacks are a local matter. They do not threaten galactic stability. Therefore, they are not our concern." 40,000 dead, Yuna said quietly. "Not your concern. You have been spacefaring for only 300 years, Velos replied. "The Dravik have sailed the stars for 12,000. The Scythene for 50,000. You are children, Ambassador. Children must learn to solve their own problems. It builds character." The chamber erupted in laughter. Even the translator device in Yuna's ear seemed to struggle with the number of different species joining in the mockery. The crystals blazed bright gold. Yuna stood perfectly still. She let the laughter wash over her like water over stone. When the noise finally died down, she spoke again. "The people of Earth thank the Council for clarifying our standing." Her voice was calm, almost gentle. "We will remember this." She turned and walked toward the exit. Her footsteps echoed in the sudden silence. Ambassador Velos called out, "The session is not concluded. You have not been dismissed." Yuna did not stop. She did not turn around. She simply walked through the great doors and let them close behind her. The council members looked at each other with confusion. In 800 years, no species had ever walked out of a session without permission. Delegate Mora made a sound that was her species' version of a snort. "Let them go," she said. "They will return tomorrow, begging as they always do. Humans are good at begging." The crystals slowly faded back to purple. The council moved on to other business. The empty human seat was quickly forgotten. 3 hours later, Ambassador Yuna stood aboard the human flagship Eternal Soul. The ship was hidden in deep space, far from any trade routes or patrol paths. Admiral Park Junho stood beside her, watching her face carefully. Junho was an older man with gray at his temples and scars on his hands. He had served in the Earth Defense Force for 40 years. He had watched humanity beg the Council for help more times than he could count. He had buried too many soldiers who died waiting for assistance that never came. "It is done?" he asked. "It is done," Yuna replied. They laughed at us again. Genhu nodded slowly. He had expected nothing less. He walked to the main communication console and entered a code that only 7 people in all of human space knew. The screen lit up with a single phrase, "Operation Homecoming Ready." "Are you certain?" Yuna asked. "Once we do this, there is no going back." Junho looked at her with tired eyes. "We have been going back for 80 years. Every time they insulted us, we went back. Every time they denied us, we went back. Every time they let our people die, we went back." He placed his hand on the console. "No more." He pressed the button across the galaxy. On thousands of ships and stations and colony worlds, every human received the same message. It was short. It was clear. It left no room for misunderstanding. All ships return to Sol. All citizens evacuate non-human space. Leave everything that is not essential. Say nothing. Do not explain. Do not argue. Simply leave. Operation Homecoming's active. We are done asking. Humanity obeyed. On the Alari homeworld, human cargo pilots abandoned their ships in the middle of delivery runs. They walked to the nearest human transport station, boarded evacuation vessels, and disappeared into hyperspace. On the Dravik border stations, human engineers shut down their tools, collected their personal belongings, and left without a word. They did not finish their projects. They did not train replacements. They simply vanished. On 100 different worlds, human doctors walked out of hospitals. Human teachers left their classrooms. Human merchants closed their shops. Human diplomats packed their bags. Within 72 hours, there was not a single human being left in alien space. They left behind everything they had built. Hospitals that they had designed. Power systems that they had installed. Trade networks that they had created. They left it all functioning, all operational, all ready to be used, but they also left behind something else. On every world where humans had lived and worked and died, they left small monuments, simple stones with names carved into them. The names of every human who had died while the Galaxy Council did nothing. 40,000 names on 12 different worlds. The Council noticed the empty human seats within a week. High Arbiter Velos ordered a message sent to Earth demanding an explanation. The message was received. It was not answered. Delegate Mora laughed when she heard the news. "Let them sulk," she said. "They will grow hungry soon enough. They will come crawling back, and when they do, we will make them pay for this insult." Elder Pell of the Sithens said nothing. The ancient being simply watched the empty seats with eyes that had seen 50,000 years of galactic history. Pell had seen species rise and fall. Pell had seen empires crumble and civilizations burn, and Pell had been watching humanity very carefully for a very long time. Something was wrong. Pell could feel it in bones that were older than most stars. Humans did not run. Humans did not hide. In 300 years of spacefaring, humans had never once retreated from a challenge. So why were they retreating now? Pell tried to warn the Council. Pell tried to explain that silence from humans was more dangerous than screaming. But no one listened to the old species anymore. The Scythene were relics of a forgotten age. Their warnings were ignored. The Council moved on to other matters. The crystals in the Great Hall glowed peaceful purple. Everything seemed normal. But far away, in the darkness between stars, humanity was preparing. They had been preparing for 80 years. And now finally, they were ready. The galaxy just did not know it yet. 6 months passed. The galaxy began to break. On the Alari homeworld, Delegate Mora stood before a crowd of angry citizens. They had gathered outside the government building, thousands of them, screaming for answers. Behind them, the great cargo port sat silent and empty. Ships rusted on landing pads. Warehouses overflowed with goods that had nowhere to go. "Where are the deliveries?" the crowd shouted. "Where is our food? Where are our supplies?" Mora tried to calm them, but her voice shook. The truth was simple and terrible. Humans had operated 60% of all cargo shipping in Alari space. They had taken the jobs that no Alari wanted. The work was hard, and the pay was low, and the hours were long. Alari considered such labor beneath their dignity, but humans had done it. quietly, efficiently, without complaint. Now they were gone. Nothing moved. Food rotted in warehouses on one world while people starved on another. Medical supplies sat in crates while hospitals ran empty. The entire economy was choking to death. Mora sent an urgent message to the Galaxy Council. She demanded that they force humanity to return to work. She called it economic terrorism and an act of war against all civilized species. High Arbiter Velos received her message and did nothing. He was dealing with his own problems. The Dravik Empire had lost half of its shipyard workers overnight. The Scythian communication networks were failing because no one knew how to maintain the systems that humans had installed. Everywhere Velos looked, there were fires that needed putting out. He sent a fleet to human space to demand their return. 12 warships, armed with the finest weapons in the galaxy. They jumped into hyperspace, confident in their mission. Only 3 came back. Warlord Geth of the Dravik Empire reviewed the survivors, reports with growing horror. They spoke of a wall. Not a physical wall, but something worse. Thousands of automated defense stations stretched across every approach to human space. The weapons they carried matched nothing in any database. They fired beams of energy that cut through shields like paper. They launched missiles that could not be tracked or stopped. The 9 destroyed ships had been eliminated in less than 4 minutes. They never even saw what hit them. Geth was old for a Dravik. He had fought in 100 battles and won most of them. He had studied military tactics from every species in the galaxy. He thought he understood war. But this was something new. This was something terrifying. They were hiding, he said to his advisors. All these years, they were hiding their true strength. They let us think they were weak. They let us mock them and dismiss them and ignore them. And the whole time, they were building this. His advisors suggested another attack, a larger fleet. Geth shook his head. If they can destroy 9 warships in 4 minutes, he said, what can they do to 90? Or 900? No. We need to understand what we are facing before we act. Sent spies instead of soldiers. Small ships with advanced cloaking technology, designed to slip past any defense. They were the best the Dravik had. None of them returned. Far from the political chaos, Elder Pell sat alone in a chamber of records. The Scythene had been keeping records for 50,000 years. They had watched every species in the galaxy rise and fall. They had documented everything. Pell had been studying humanity since the day they first arrived at the council. Something about them had seemed wrong. Not dangerous exactly, but wrong. Like a puzzle piece that did not quite fit. Now Pell understood. The Elder pulled up record after record, searching for patterns. And the patterns were there, hidden in plain sight. Every time humanity asked the council a question, they learned something. Every time they were denied technology, they built something better. Every failure was actually a test. Every moment of weakness was actually a mask. Humans had been playing a role for 80 years. The role of the humble newcomer, the eager student. The species that needed help and guidance from their betters, it was all a lie. Pell found records of human engineers asking innocent questions about Dravik weapons systems. Years later, those same weapons appeared in human designs, improved and modified. Pell found records of human diplomats requesting tours of Alari shipyards. Those diplomats had memorized every detail and sent the information home. Humans did not forget anything. They stored every piece of information, every insult, every denial. They built databases of weaknesses and vulnerabilities. They mapped the entire galaxy's military, economic, and political structures. And they did it all while smiling and bowing and pretending to be grateful for the scraps they were given. Pell tried to warn the council. The Elder requested an emergency session, submitted detailed reports, demanded that someone listen. But the council had other concerns. The economy was collapsing. Species were blaming each other for the chaos. Old rivalries were flaring into new conflicts. No, one had time for the warnings of an ancient species about the intentions of the younger ones. On Earth, Admiral Junho stood in a vast underground chamber. The chamber stretched 4 kilometers beneath the surface of the moon. Inside it, row after row of warships waited in perfect silence. Thousands of them. Tens of thousands. Dr. Hannah walked beside him, reviewing data on a tablet. She was young for her position, but her mind was sharper than anyone else in the defense ministry. She had designed half of the weapons systems in this fleet. The Council has sent 3 more diplomatic messages, she reported. Each one is more threatening than the last. They demand we return to our proper place in galactic society. And if we refuse, Junho asked, they threaten economic sanctions? Trade restrictions. Military action. It was not a happy sound. Economic sanctions, as if we need their economy. We have been building our own supply chains for 40 years. Trade restrictions, as if we have not already established secret routes with a dozen minor species who hate the Council as much as we do. Military action. He gestured at the fleet around them. Let them come. Anna hesitated. Admiral, there is one more thing. Captain Lee Minho reports that his stealth fleet is in position. 12 carrier groups hidden near the critical infrastructure of the major Council species. Fuel depots, communication relays, shipyards. They are undetected and awaiting orders. Junho nodded slowly. Good. And the ground forces. General Kim Tai-ho has completed training of the new divisions. 2 million soldiers, equipped with weapons the Council has never seen. They are ready. Junho stood in silence for a long moment, looking at the fleet he had spent his entire life building. These ships were not just metal and engines. They were the answer to every insult, every dismissal, every death that could have been prevented if the Council had simply listened. 80 years, he said quietly. 80 years of planning, of hiding, of pretending to be less than we are. Do you think it was worth it? Hannah considered the question carefully. I think we had no choice. They would never have respected us as equals. They would never have given us a seat at the table. So we built our own table. And now they will have to accept us or face the consequences. The consequences, Junho repeated. Millions will die. On both sides, millions have already died, Hannah replied. Her voice was cold. 40,000 in the raids alone. How many more over the decades? How many human lives were lost because the Council decided we were not worth protecting? Junho did not answer. He did not need to. They both knew the number. It was carved into monuments on 12 dead worlds. Send a message to Captain Minho, Junho said finally. Tell him to maintain position and await further orders. We will not strike first. But when they come for us, we will be ready. Hannah nodded and turned to leave. At the door, she paused. Admiral, there is one question I have never asked you. All those years ago when we first joined the Council, did we know? Did we know from the beginning that it would come to this? Junho smiled. It was a tired smile, full of years and pain and secrets. We hoped it would not, he said, but we planned as if it would. That is the human way. Hope for the best. Prepare for the worst. He looked out at his fleet one last time, and we have been preparing for a very long time. 1 year after humanity walked away, the Galaxy Council received a transmission they could not ignore. Every screen in the Great Hall flickered and went dark. The crystals in the walls stopped glowing. For a terrible moment, the most powerful beings in the galaxy sat in complete darkness and silence. Then the screens came back to life. An Ambassador Yuna appeared on every one of them. She was not wearing diplomatic robes. She wore the black uniform of Earth's military government, sharp and simple, and covered with medals. Her hair was pulled back in a tight braid. Her eyes were hard. Behind her stood Admiral Park Junho. He said nothing. He did not need to. His presence alone sent a message that every delegate understood. This transmission is being broadcast to every council system, Yuna said. Her voice was calm and clear. Your communication networks have been temporarily placed under our control. You cannot shut this off. You cannot look away. You will listen. High Arbiter Velos rose from his seat, all 4 arms trembling with rage. This is an act of war. This is an invasion of sovereign systems. The Council will respond with, Sit down, Yuna said. The words were quiet, but something in her tone made Velos stop. He looked around at the other delegates. They were all staring at the screens, frozen in shock. Slowly, he sat back down. Good, Yuna continued. Now, before we discuss the future, we will discuss the past. I have prepared a list. You will listen to every word. She began to read every insult, every mockery. Every time a human delegate had been laughed at or dismissed or told to wait their turn. Yuna read them all, date by date, speaker by speaker. The delegates squirmed in their seats as they heard their own words quoted back at them. Then she read the other list. The list of the dead. 40,000 names. Colonists who had died in raider attacks while the council debated procedure. Children who had starved when supply ships were redirected to more important species. Soldiers who had fallen defending borders that the council said were not worth protecting. Yuna read every name. It took 4 hours. The delegates could not leave. Their doors had been sealed by remote override. They could not turn off the screens. They could only sit and listen and hear what they had done. When she finished, the hall was silent. Some delegates could not meet her eyes. Others stared with hatred. A few, like Elder Pell, simply watched with ancient, knowing sadness. Now, Yuna said, we will discuss terms. She presented humanity's demands. Recognition of human sovereignty over 200 star systems, 5 times their original territory. Reparations for 80 years of exploitation and neglect. Permanent seats on all council, military, and economic committees. A formal apology broadcast to every world in the galaxy. High Arbiter, Velos found his voice again. You are insane, he said. You control 40 systems. We control thousands. You have a few ships. We have the greatest military force in galactic history. These demands are the ravings of a mad species. Yuna did not respond. She simply nodded to someone off-screen. A new image appeared. Maps of council space, covered in red dots. Hundreds of them, clustered around shipyards and fuel depots and communication relays. These are the current positions of our stealth fleet, Yuna said. 12 carrier groups. Each one is within striking distance of critical infrastructure belonging to a major council species. You did not detect them. You cannot stop them. One order from Admiral Junho, and your ability to wage war ends in a single night. Delegate Mora jumped to her feet. You are bluffing. No species has stealth technology that advanced. 3 months ago, Yuna replied, 17 Alari patrol ships disappeared near the Varan Nebula. You blamed pirates? You were wrong. We were testing our systems. Your ships never saw us coming. Mora's face went pale. She slowly sat back down. These are not negotiations, Yuna continued. These are terms. You have 1 week to accept them. If you do not, the red dots on this map will become debris fields. The choice is yours. The transmission ended. The screens went dark. The crystals in the walls flickered back to their normal purple glow. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Warlord Geth stood up. His scales had turned dark red, the Dravic color of rage. We do not negotiate with terrorists, he growled. The Empire will crush these humans. We will burn their worlds and scatter their ashes across the void. And how do you propose to do that? Elder Pell asked quietly. You sent 12 ships to human space. 3 returned. You sent spies? None returned. What makes you think a larger fleet will succeed? Numbers, Geth replied. I will mobilize 10,000 warships, the largest fleet assembled in 3 centuries. No defense can stand against such force. El sighed. You still do not understand. They have been planning this for longer than you can imagine. They know exactly what you will do before you do it. They are counting on your pride and your anger. They want you to attack. But Geth was not listening. He was already sending orders to his commanders. Within hours, the Dravic fleet began to gather. 10,000 warships, armed with the most powerful weapons in the galaxy. It was a force that had conquered entire civilizations. Admiral Junho watched them assemble through long-range sensors. He sat in a command bunker buried deep beneath Earth's surface. surrounded by screens showing every ship movement in the galaxy. General Kim Tae-ho stood beside him, studying the formation patterns. "They are coming," Tae-ho said, exactly as Dr. Hannah predicted. "They will arrive at the Kepler transit point in 18 hours. And our forces? 600 ships at the transit point. Another 2,000 in reserve, hidden behind the fourth moon. Ground-based weapons platforms are charged and ready. The trap is set. 600 against 10,000, Junho murmured. On paper, we should lose." "On paper," Tae-ho agreed. "But paper does not account for 40 years of preparation. Paper does not know about the weapons we have built. Paper does not understand that we have studied every Dravik battle tactic in recorded history." And Ho turned to face his general. "Tae-ho, I want you to understand something. When this battle is over, win or lose, everything changes. Humanity will no longer be the quiet species in the corner. We will be a power in this galaxy. And powers attract enemies." Tae-ho straightened his uniform. "We have always had enemies, Admiral. The difference is that now they will know to fear us." The Dravik fleet emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation. 10,000 warships, arranged in the classic Dravik assault pattern that had won them 100 victories. Warlord Geth stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the human defense fleet appear on his sensors. 600 ships. He almost laughed. "All vessels advance," he commanded. "Destroy them all. Leave none alive." The Dravik fleet moved forward like a wave of destruction. Their weapons charged. Their shields activated. Victory was certain. Then the humans fired. Beams of energy cut through Dravik's shields like they were made of paper. Missiles appeared from nowhere, launched from platforms hidden in asteroid fields and moon surfaces. The human ships moved in patterns that seemed random, but were actually perfectly coordinated. Each vessel covering the others, each weapon firing at exactly the right moment. The Dravik returned fire. But their weapons could not lock onto targets that moved so unpredictably. Their formations broke as ships tried to avoid attacks from directions they could not anticipate. Geth watched in horror, as his numbers meant nothing. Human ships were outnumbered 16-1, but they were destroying Dravik vessels at a rate of 20-1. His fleet was being slaughtered. "Fall back," he finally screamed. "All ships fall back." The survivors fled into hyperspace. Behind them, 4,000 Dravik warships drifted as burning wreckage. The battle had lasted 6 hours. Humanity lost 200 ships. Geth sent a single message to the Galaxy Council. They were waiting for us. They knew exactly where we would arrive. They had been planning this for longer than we imagined. Do not send more ships. You will only be sending them to die. In the great hall of the council, the crystals turned a deep, fearful red, and in his bunker beneath Earth, Admiral Junho allowed himself a small, sad smile. "Phase 1 complete," he said quietly. "Now they know we are serious. Now the real war begins." 18 months after humanity walked away, the galaxy was burning. Captain Lee Minho sat in the command chair of the stealth carrier Silent Dawn. Around him, his crew worked in absolute silence. No unnecessary words. No wasted movements. They had trained for this moment for years. Outside the ship, the stars were hidden by the bulk of the Alari's largest shipyard. It was a massive structure, capable of building 50 warships at once. It was also completely unaware that death was floating less than 10 kilometers away. "All ships report ready," Minho's second officer whispered. Minho checked his watch. In exactly 3 minutes, 2 other carrier groups would strike their own targets. The Dravik's primary fuel depot. The communication relay linking the Council's core worlds. 3 targets, 3 simultaneous strikes. Timed to the second, he thought about the last message he had received from Admiral Junho. It was simple: remove their ability to fight. Spare as many lives as possible. We are not monsters. Minho intended to honor both parts of that order. Target the structural supports and engine cores, he commanded. Avoid crew quarters and escape pod bays. We want to cripple the station, not massacre everyone on it. The countdown reached 0. The Silent Dawn and her sister ships decloaked and opened fire. The shipyard never had a chance. Human weapons tore through critical systems with surgical precision. Power generators exploded. Structural beams melted. In less than 10 minutes, the great shipyard was a drifting hulk, incapable of building anything ever again. But the crew quarters remained intact. Escape pods, launched by the hundreds. Minho watched them flee toward the planet below and felt something that might have been relief. "Recloak and withdraw," he ordered. Mission complete. Across the galaxy, the other strikes succeeded just as cleanly. The Dravik fuel depot was destroyed, leaving their remaining fleet stranded without power. The communication relay was disabled, cutting off instant contact between Council worlds. In a single night, humanity had broken the Council's ability to coordinate a response. Elder Pell received the news in silence. The ancient Scythian had stopped attending Council sessions weeks ago. There was no point. The Council was falling apart. Species blamed each other for the failures. Old alliances crumbled. New hatreds emerged. A young aide approached Pell's chamber with a request. High Arbiter Velos wanted a private meeting. He wanted the wisdom of the ancient species. Pell agreed, though not out of hope. Hope had died months ago. Velos arrived looking like a shadow of his former self. His gray skin had turned pale. His forearms hung limp at his sides. The confidence that had defined him was gone. "Tell me," he said. "Tell me what you know. Tell me how they did this." Pell gestured to a chair. Velos sat down heavily. "I tried to warn you," Pell began. "Years ago, decades ago, but you would not listen. None of you would listen. I am listening now." Pell pulled up ancient records on a viewing screen. Documents spanning 80 years. Human requests for information. Human questions about technology. Human diplomatic missions that had seemed harmless at the time. "They studied us," Pell explained. "Every single one of us. They asked questions, and we answered because we thought they were beneath us. We thought they were children seeking too. Learn from their betters. We were wrong. The records showed the pattern clearly. Humans had mapped every species' military tactics, every technological weakness, every political division. They had found every crack in the Council's armor and remembered them all. Every time we insulted them, they learned," Pell continued. "Every time we denied them, they adapted. Every time we showed them our strength, they found a way to counter it. We taught them everything they needed to defeat us, and we were too arrogant to notice." Velos stared at the records with hollow eyes. Why? Why did they pretend to be weak for so long? Because they had no choice. When they first arrived, they truly were weak. If they had shown their real intentions, we would have crushed them. So they hid. They smiled and bowed and accepted our contempt, and they used every moment to prepare for the day when they would no longer have to pretend. Velos was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was barely a whisper. "Can we win?" Pell did not answer. The silence was answer enough. On the reclaimed colony world of New Busan, General Kim Taiho walked among the ruins. Human soldiers had landed here 3 weeks ago, taking back what had once belonged to them. The raiders who had attacked this world were gone, driven away by the very war they had helped start, but the scars remained. Taiho stopped in front of a small monument. It was made of simple stone, carved with names. 2,317 names. Colonists who had died here while the Galaxy Council debated whether their lives were worth protecting. His soldiers gathered behind him in silence. They had all seen monuments like this. Every reclaimed world had one. Every name was a reminder of why they were fighting. "Remember them?" Taiho said quietly. "Remember why we are here. Remember what was done to us. And remember that we fight not for revenge, but so that no human will ever have to beg for protection again." The soldiers saluted. Then they returned to their work, rebuilding what had been destroyed far away. On the Ilari homeworld, Delegate Mora sat in her private chambers. Her scales had turned a sickly gray color. Her political career was over. Her people blamed her for the catastrophe. She had been the loudest voice mocking humanity. Now humanity's shadow fell across everything she had built. A human patrol ship had intercepted her transport 2 days ago. She had expected to die. Instead, Captain Minho had given her a choice: deliver a message to the Council, or become another casualty of war. She chose to live. Now she sat in front of a recording device, preparing to broadcast that message to the entire galaxy. I speak to you not as a delegate, but as a warning. I have seen the human fleet. I have seen what they can do. And I tell you now, this war cannot be won. Every battle we fight only makes them stronger. Every ship we lose cannot be replaced. They have been planning this for generations, and we have been blind. She paused, gathering her courage for the final words. The humans do not want to destroy us. If they did, we would already be gone. They want us to understand. They want us to know what it feels like to be dismissed and ignored and left to die. They want us to feel what they felt for 80 years. The recording ended. Mora slumped in her chair, defeated. The message spread across the galaxy within hours. Species that had been preparing to fight suddenly hesitated. Voices calling for peace grew louder. The Council's unity, already fragile, began to shatter completely. On Earth, Admiral Gunho and Dr. Hannah watched Mora's broadcast together. She did well, Hannah observed. Better than I expected. Fear is a powerful motivator. Gunho did not respond immediately. He was staring out the window at the night sky, filled with stars that humanity had once dreamed of exploring in peace. We are winning, he finally said. But I wonder what we are becoming. Hannah turned to face him. We are becoming what they forced us to become. A species that cannot be ignored. A species that will never beg for scraps again. And is that worth the cost? The lives lost. The innocents who have suffered because of this war. Hannah's expression hardened. Ask the 40,000 who died while the Council laughed. Ask the children who starved while Delegate Mora mocked our weakness. Ask every human who was told their life did not matter. Junho closed his eyes. He knew she was right. He knew that everything they had done was justified by decades of cruelty and neglect. But he also knew that justified violence was still violence, and violence always left scars. Send a message to Ambassador Yuna, he said quietly. Tell her to prepare a final offer. Generous terms. A chance for peace? You think they will accept? No, Junho admitted. But we will offer it anyway. When history judges us, I want them to know that we gave them every chance. Every opportunity to end this without more bloodshed. He opened his eyes and looked at the stars once more. When they refuse, as they surely will, then we will finish what they started. 3 years after humanity walked away, the war ended. Not with a final battle, but with a whisper of surrender. High Arbiter Velos stood alone in the Great Hall of the Galaxy Council. The chamber that had once held representatives from 47 species now echoed with emptiness. Most delegates had fled to their homeworlds. Others had been removed by their own people, blamed for the disaster they could not prevent. The crystals in the walls had stopped glowing entirely, as if the building itself had given up. Velos held a document in his trembling hands. It was the formal surrender of the Galaxy Council to the United Human Federation. His signature at the bottom would end 800 years of galactic order and begin something entirely new. He had no choice. Humanity had not conquered them through total destruction. They had done something far more effective. They had simply made the Council irrelevant. Human trade ships now controlled 70% of all cargo movement in the galaxy. Species that had once mocked humanity now depended on them for food, medicine, and technology. The great military powers had exhausted themselves fighting a war they could not win. Their fleets were broken. Their economies were shattered. Their people were starving, and through it all, humanity had remained patient. They had waited for the Council to realize that surrender was not defeat, but survival. Velos signed the document. It felt like signing his own death warrant. 3 days later, he was removed from power by his own species. They exiled him to a barren moon at the edge of known space, where he would live out his remaining years in isolation. Humanity did not object. They did not need vengeance against one politician. They had already won something far more valuable. The new Galactic Assembly met for the first time on a human space station orbiting Earth. Representatives from 32 species gathered in a chamber designed to feel different from the old council hall. There were no towering ceilings or glowing crystals meant to intimidate. The room was simple, functional, built for work rather than display. Ambassador Yuna stood at the central podium. She had aged in the past 3 years. There were lines on her face that had not been there before, and gray streaks in her black hair. But her voice was still strong. "We did not seek this war," she began. "For 80 years, we asked only for fairness. We asked only to be treated as equals. We were denied. We were mocked. We were told that our lives did not matter." She paused, letting the words settle over the assembly. "We will not rule this galaxy the way you ruled us. We will not dismiss the concerns of smaller species. We will not laugh at those who ask for help. The old council believed that power meant the right to ignore those weaker than yourself. We believe something different." She looked around the room, meeting the eyes of delegates who had once been her enemies. "Power means responsibility. The strong must protect the weak, not exploit them. This assembly will be built on that principle, and we will hold ourselves to the same standard we expect from others." Elder Pell watched from the back of the chamber. The ancient Scythian had survived the war, as the Scythian always survived. They were too old and too wise to be a threat to anyone, but for the first time in thousands of years, Pell felt something that might have been hope. On a quiet farm outside the city of Seoul, Admiral Park Jun-ho sat on his porch and watched the sun set. He had retired immediately after the surrender. His work was done. The fleet he had built, the war he had planned, the victory he had achieved, they all belonged to history now. A young officer had come to see him the day before, asking him to speak at a ceremony honoring the veterans of the war. Gun-ho had refused. "There's nothing to celebrate," he had told the officer. "We did what we had to do. We protected our people. But war is not a source of pride. It is a tragedy that we could not avoid." The officer had not understood. He was too young. He had only seen the victories, the parades, the cheering crowds. He had not seen the faces of the dead. He had not read the reports of civilian casualties on both sides. He had not signed the orders that sent thousands of soldiers to their deaths. Gensho had done all of those things, and he would carry that weight until the day he died. A transport ship flew overhead, heading toward the stars. Gun-ho watched it disappear into the darkening sky. Somewhere out there, Captain Lee Min-ho was leading a new expedition. Not a military mission, but an exploration fleet. Humanity was looking outward now, toward unknown space, toward new frontiers that no species had ever reached. It was a better use of their talents, Jun-ho thought. Building instead of destroying. Exploring instead of conquering. He hoped it would last. In a research facility on Mars, Dr. Hannah met with Elder Pell. The ancient being had requested a private conversation, and Hannah was curious enough to agree. They sat across from each other in a small conference room. Pell's eyes, older than most stars, studied Hannah with quiet intensity. "I have a question," Pell said finally. "One that has troubled me since the war began," Hannah replied. "Did humanity plan all of this from the beginning? The 80 years of patience? The hidden fleet? The precise moment of departure? Was every step calculated?" Hannah smiled. It was a small smile, neither proud nor ashamed. "We are not that clever," she admitted. "When we first joined the council, we truly hoped for peace. We hoped that if we worked hard and proved ourselves, we would eventually be accepted as equals. But you were not. We were mocked and dismissed and ignored. And somewhere along the way, we realized that hope alone would not save us. So we began to prepare. Not because we wanted war, but because we knew war might come whether we wanted it or not." Pell considered this. "And the hidden fleet?" The stealth carriers. The weapons that no one had ever seen? Insurance, Hannah said simply. Every generation, we improved our defenses a little more. We studied our potential enemies a little more carefully. We built contingency plans and backup systems and secret facilities, not because we expected to use them, but because we could not afford to be caught unprepared. Humans have a saying, Pell observed. Hope for the best, prepare for the worst. You have been studying us. For 80 years, Pell admitted. I watched your species more closely than any other. I saw the patterns that others missed. I tried to warn the council, but they would not listen. Hannah nodded slowly. We know. Admiral Junho read your reports. They were very accurate. Pell was silent for a moment, processing this information. You knew that I knew? We knew that someone was watching us carefully. We could not identify who, but we knew they existed. It made us more cautious, more careful to maintain our disguise. The ancient being made a sound that might have been laughter. All those years, I thought I was the observer. I did not realize I was also being observed. Hannah stood and walked to the window. Outside, the red desert of Mars stretched to the horizon. Human cities dotted the landscape, proof of what her species could build when given the chance. There is something I want you to understand, she said quietly. We did not enjoy this war. We did not celebrate the deaths of our enemies. Every life lost, on any side, was a tragedy. But you would do it again, Pell said. It was not a question. If we had to, if there was no other way, we tried everything else first. Diplomacy, patience, compromise. None of it worked. Violence was the last option, not the first. And now? Hannah turned back to face the ancient being. Now we build something better. Something that will never treat any species the way we were treated. It will not be perfect. Nothing ever is. But it will be fairer than what came before. 1 year later, the new Galactic Assembly held its first anniversary celebration. Ambassador Yuna stood on a balcony overlooking the gathering below. Delegates from dozens of species mingled together, talking, laughing, sharing food and drink from 100 different worlds. A young delegate approached her nervously. He was from a minor species called the Ven, who had only achieved spaceflight 50 years ago. Under the old council, they had been ignored completely. Now they had the same vote as any other member. Ambassador, the young Ven said, his voice trembling. I wanted to thank you. Before the war, my people submitted 17 requests for assistance. Not one was ever answered. But last month, when we asked the Assembly for help with our agricultural crisis, we received aid within a week. Yuna smiled and placed a hand on his shoulder. That is how it should have always been. The strong help the weak. The established help the newcomers. That is what civilization means. I heard stories about what happened to humanity, the Ven continued. How you were ignored and mocked for decades. How you had to fight for respect that should have been given freely. I cannot imagine how difficult that must have been. Yuna's smile faded slightly. Old memories flickered behind her eyes. The laughter of the council. The names of 40,000 dead. The years of planning and hiding and waiting. We survived, she said finally. And we learned. And now we make sure that no one else has to go through what we went through. The young delegate bowed deeply. If my species ever achieves what yours has achieved, I hope we will remember your example. He left to rejoin the celebration. Yuna watched him go, then turned to look at the stars visible through the station's transparent dome. Somewhere out there, human ships were exploring new frontiers. Somewhere out there, the galaxy was slowly healing from the wounds of war. It would take time. Generations, perhaps. But humanity had learned the value of patience. They had walked away from a galaxy that did not want them. They had returned to build a galaxy that worked for everyone. And they would spend the rest of their existence making sure that no species, weak or strong, old or young, would ever be told that their lives did not matter, because humans remembered. They always remembered, and they had promised themselves long ago that they would never let anyone forget far away. On a barren moon at the edge of known space, former High Arbiter Velos sat alone in his exile. He had a single window that looked out at the stars. Every night, He stared at those distant lights and thought about the species he had dismissed as children. They had been children once, weak and uncertain and desperate for guidance. But children grow. Children learn. Children become something more than their parents ever expected. Velos had learned that lesson too late. But he had learned it, and in the silence of his exile, he finally understood the truth that had escaped him for so long. The younger ones had never been beneath the galaxy's notice. They had simply been waiting for the right moment to stand up, and now the galaxy would never be the same.